Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni to network and connect within their affinity communities. And this show is based on helping athletes to transition out of sports. We interview former collegiate and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey. And there's a lot of problems today with mental health, financial literacy, and we're trying to make a difference and teach and inspire athletes that there is, in fact, life after sports. We're really excited today to have Kim Brady on. How you doing, Kim?
I'm good. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing fantastic. We're so happy to have you. We were talking a little bit offline. We got some great content today to really help athletes out. So Kim was a soccer player at Cal, and then she went on to ultimately got a master's degree, got into community agency counseling, which she'll talk a little bit about. But ultimately, the entrepreneur bug hit her. She started a company called Little Bit Cleaning, which is kind of a cool name there. And then ultimately today she has Kim Brady business coaching, which is all about helping people out. And I'm sure athletes, you can definitely reach out to Kim and get some more guidance from her. So we always like to start off and ask, how did playing sports growing up kind of shape you through high school and ultimately college?
I always tell people that soccer is my guiding light. It truly is my guiding light. I was 4 when I first started playing soccer, 4 years old, Southern California. My brother was on a soccer team and he was 7 and he hated it, absolutely hated it. And I was just a super hyper little girl and I ran on the field when he didn't go after the ball. And my mom was mortified. And the coach was like, it's okay. Just put the little one over there with the soccer ball. And I wouldn't stop. I was incessantly like begging my parents to put me on a team. So when I was 5, they put me on my very first team that I played. And I never stopped loving the game of soccer, just never stopped loving it. And so playing as a little girl and playing on the rec teams and then being recruited to play club at a very young age. And my parents, I was young. I started school when I was 4 and I started soccer when I was 5. And so they were like, oh my gosh, okay. I was tiny, hence my name Little Bit. We get into that later, but I was tiny, but I was mighty. So they called me Little Mighty Mouse or Little Bit or all these funny little names. And I just played. And then when I started playing club when I was 11 and played year round, starting I think in junior high school. I was actually already playing a year round for soccer when I was 12 years old. I started high school at 13, was the only freshman to make varsity my freshman year at 13, and all my teammates were 17, 18 years old. So I was always around players who were bigger than me, stronger than me, faster than me, and obviously more mature than me. So I was like a little sister. They took me in. So I was very much well cared for by my teammates, which was really lovely. I think some players don't have that experience with the way that teams are right now, but the seniors that I was playing with took me in like a little sister. I was also a very good student. And so I loved school. So I was a total nerd and super shy. And I just wanted to do well in school and wanted to go play soccer. Like that was it. I was this really, really shy kid. And I became a scholar athlete and, won a lot of awards and National Honor Society and, all these various things as a straight A student. And then also won several awards as a soccer player and championships and being selected to all teams, all leagues and MVP of the league, et cetera. And played on the Olympic development teams for state teams and regional teams as well. Didn't make the national team. They all kicked my butt. And that was how I got recruited to play in college, was through all of these experiences. So soccer is what made me. You can't extract that part of me. I mean, that's all I know.
No, that's great. And I mean, any particular, I guess, skills that were developed, not necessarily soccer skills, but just in general, I guess, life skills that through playing soccer growing up?
A lot of them. I think the discipline that I had to go outside and play, to kick a ball around, to carry a ball with me, to go run on my own, was inherent to me. My parents did not drive me in any way, shape, or form to be the athlete that I was. And I think there's beauty there. It was all intrinsic motivation. And I think sometimes people ask or seek out extrinsic validation of, well, I only want to compete if I win. I wanted to compete because I loved the game and I wanted to get better. And so the internal driver of life skills of wanting to get better when things are hard, learning that when there's times that I was cut from teams, there are times that I played on some teams that I wasn't a starter, right? I wanted to become a starter. I became a starter, right? But there were times that I wasn't, and I never quit. Like, I just have this never give up attitude of, if I'm good enough, they'll select me. But in order for me to be good enough, I have to do the work. And when you play with and against players who are the best of the best, and I'm saying the best of the best, I played against women's national team players. Okay. These were players that I was competing against who won the 99ers World Cup that everybody knows about. These were people I was competing against. So I didn't have, one, an ego. I knew they were the best. I wasn't as good as them. So being humble, I think, is extremely important for athletes. You can be confident and feel that you're really good, but one day someone's going to be better. One day someone can be better than you. You can have an off game. You can have a bad practice. You didn't eat right, or you didn't have good enough sleep, or you failed a test. You're going to have those things. So the skills of actively, consistently working and being persistent and not quitting, to be positive and humble, to be critical of yourself in certain ways of like, I know I can get better. I know I need to get better at this particular thing. I'm not doing well with this skill or whatever. I'm going to go outside and play. I'm going to go outside and touch the ball. I think people need to look within the mirror and go, how much do I want this? And that's something a lot of times kids struggle with. They want it because someone else is there. They want it, but they don't know what it takes to sacrifice.
Yeah,
I think,
and I agree. I mean, all those skill sets too. I mean, and then we'll talk about it in a little bit. Even for companies looking for athletes. I mean, athletes have a lot to offer just based on everything you talked about: perseverance,
sure.
resiliency, and just leadership. All the different skills there. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about again, the show being about athletes transitioning out of sports. So when
Mhm.
you were at Cal, were there classes or curriculum there? And not just the one-off workshop, but curriculum there that athletes were either forced to take or they wanted to take that would help them transition out of sports ultimately.
Nope. Short answer, no. We had athletic study table, which was a requirement for us to make sure that we were getting our homework done and tutoring and whatever. And I always joked that was just a dating pool. That was just for people to go date. I hated working in that environment because I didn't do well studying in that environment. And so I had to talk with my coach and say, I'm not doing well here. I'm struggling in my classes. Cal is a very hard school.
Yeah.
It's like you're next to people whose GPAs are like insane. You all of a sudden, as a 4.0 straight A student, are no longer smart. Okay. So I'm not doing well my freshman year in my classes, but I worked hard and I got tutors and, things like that. But as far as preparation for athletes themselves to learn how to do things after school or what you're pursuing, it was not specific to us at all. It may have been given to some of the football players or basketball players because those are the financially lucrative sports. But for women's athletes, my athletic department was still split between women's athletes and male athletes. We were still split. Our locker room was a closet compared to the men's locker room, right? So no, we didn't have anything like that. But on the flip side, because we didn't have professional opportunity after college, especially for women, almost every single woman was going to school to get an education to pursue something outside of, they were going to get a career. Right. Period. You didn't meet people who were going to compete at that level and graduate and not go get a job. They just didn't teach you specifically how to do that. I also was at the time, and we talked about this offline, but we were at a time where we were allowed to work as athletes. So I worked while going to school, and I worked at the Department of Athletics. Ours was Department of Intercollegiate Athletics. and I work to do events and help set up and tear down different sporting events, whether it's baseball, softball, volleyball, whatever. So I got to be in the student athlete arena. But then I also worked at the recreational sports facility, which is called the RSF, which is our school gym, the campus gym. And there's a organization called the National Intramural and Recreational Sports Association. And I highly recommend that, NIRSA, to anyone who is enjoying sport at all, because you can get career paths within sport, whether it's campus or intramural or whatever, but it's truly within collegiate athletics. It's in the recreational side. And a lot of the folks that I was working with at the gym, we all went to conferences for NIRSA every year. And that was where they taught us how to write your resume. That's where they taught us how to interview for jobs. That's how they taught us how to dress appropriately. But it wasn't specific to student athletes. It was specific to the rec side and open to all employees of the gym. So there are people that never went into, like myself, never went into the recreational or intercollegiate side of things as a professional, but there were many who did.
Yeah,
That
I think that things have probably changed a little bit too. And I know, like, even at my school, like, I went to Delaware, and I'm sure like schools are probably getting better today with that.
Mhm.
But it's interesting too, having that outside organization. And the one thing I've learned on a lot of these podcasts too, talking to different athletes, I think it depends on the schools, like the size of the school, like whether it's Division 1 versus Division 2, Division 3, male athletes versus female athletes, football versus other sports, could be
Right.
soccer, wrestling, running. I mean, I was a runner in college myself, so I can see that. And I think if there's not maybe a direct path to being a professional athlete, those student athletes probably have a better feel for, like you said, to just kind of embrace other things out there, knowing that their future career is not going to be in that, and then they're
Mhm.
more open to it. So another area that we like to cover is we talk about alumni engagement. And
Mhm.
so I guess I'm going to hit it on two sides, and I always try to do this. Is one, talking about when you were at school, and then maybe today as an alumni. So when you were at school, was there a push to have alumni athletes coming back, and not just for different events or games,
Mhm.
but more so to work with the other athletes, across all sports?
So Cal has kind of a special legacy when it comes to the women's soccer program. So it started in 1982 from the coach who actually recruited me. It was started from him. And one of the women there's several women during that period who were on the national team and who were Olympians and won gold medals and all the accolades, right? Even in the 80s. And the alumni for the women's soccer program is very tight community, especially depending on which coach was there over the past 35, 40 years. And one of the best athletes to ever come through Cal was on the women's soccer team. And I'm not talking about Alex Morgan, even though that's who everybody knows. I'm talking about Leslie Gallimore. Leslie Gallimore was the athlete of the decade at Cal, above and beyond every athlete in the college. Okay. Right. Above football, above basketball, above everyone. And Leslie is a phenomenal coach, is a pioneer of the game, is an advocate for sport, for soccer, for women, etc. And when you have people like that who are truly some of the kindest people too. So our alumni group is very unique, that I don't necessarily think that some college organizations have. As an overall university, to bring athletes back to talk to, no, that was only football and basketball. I mean, I went to school with Jason Kidd, so they would bring him back, right? Or they would bring some players back who were on the football team, right? And they do that now. Now they have what's called the Golden Bear Network. Now they have an influx of money that's come in from the Cameron Institute, and they've built things where former collegiate athletes could come and mentor or provide jobs or training, et cetera, to the current student athletes. So I mentor current athletes at Cal as part of the Golden Bear Network. I want to give back to the program. But the women's soccer alumni, there's a tight community. There's over 300 alumni that are involved in building the next generation of Cal women's soccer. So regardless of coach, whoever's coaching, so that's been a pretty profound thing. It's a pretty special place for that.
Yeah, and I think that's great because you hit on two things. Number one, I think, yeah, like everything, I mean, now probably alumni are getting more engaged, or not everywhere, but the one thing you hit on too is that you hear a lot about is being kind of coach specific. So if you've got good coaches, they kind of carry on that legacy. And then when the coaches leave, sometimes what I found is that maybe the older alumni might in a sense be forgotten. So I think it's, obviously it's a two-way street. It's alumni wanting to come back and give back, like you're talking about, which I'm the same way, or the school's kind of reaching out. But it is something that I think is very important for people to tap into their alumni, because alumni are willing to help. And I mean, they have those fond memories, like in your case of playing soccer there and all that. So that's great. Now, let's talk a little bit about kind of piggybacking off of that. Let's talk about the importance of networking and connecting.
Networking makes or breaks you. And that's not just a job situation. I look at networking as building relationships. I had a period of my life where I went into sales, and my background as a therapist, that's what I went to school for, etc. But everything that I've done in my life is always about relationships and being a helper and being a servant leader. I didn't have that phrasing back then, right? I wanted to work with kids and be a therapist and help kids who were less fortunate. I wanted to give back to the game that made me. I became a soccer coach, right? So I got licensed to become a soccer coach. And then when I got into sales, my bosses, because we all talk about this, collegiate athletes are heavily recruited by corporate America. But the dilemma that I have, that I experience, that I witness and see other athletes experience, is you get placed as a cog in the wheel, and they only want the skills you have, but they don't want to give back to you. And I was constantly seeking, like yearning for team in corporate America. I didn't have team in sales and didn't have team. You had competition to the point where people would steal deals, depending on what company I was in. I had people doing that. Or I'd witness really horrible leadership. I'd witness abusive leadership, whether I was the one who it was being done to, or whether you witness it to others. And that part of being a good networker and building relationship, my bosses wanted me to learn to cold call. I was so petrified. I was so shy. The thought of going into some place, I've not taught these skills, right? I was never taught how to cold call. I mean, I was just the shy little tiny kid who wanted to play soccer. I graduated at 21 years old. So when I went into sales when I was 25, this was all new. I had no idea. And I was like, what do you mean cold call? And I had this vision, right, of like the used car salesman with his hair sticking out and just being this creeper who just begged you for his sales and lied to you and bait and switch. This was my image of sales. Well, when I witnessed people do some of those really gnarly tactics to obtain their quota, I got really disillusioned. But in that process, I knew if I built relationships, and that was I'm Italian. It was very old fashioned, and with a handshake and a smile, my word meant something. So if I told you I was going to do something, I would be the person who did it, which is a very athlete thing. You show up, whether you're sick or dying, it doesn't matter. You show up, right? So I would show up for work. I would show up for my appointments. I would show up on time, which meant 10 minutes early. I would make sure I was prepared. All of those things to show that whatever client or potential client prospect I was selling to knew Kim's going to be here. She's going to follow through. She's not going to lie to us about what she's selling. So the networking piece is just staying true to your core values and aligning yourself with companies and people that sit with your core values and building great relationships over time. And that was ultimately what helped me catapult myself into entrepreneurship, because I got involved in a networking group, an actual networking group that I met with every single week and built relationships with, and started understanding what they did and how I could support them, what they needed from me, whether it was from my company or not, and built introductions. And I became a conduit. I know a guy, he could do this. I know a girl, she could do this, and try to be that person where people could depend on me and they understood that I was going to follow through with what I said I was going to do. And networking is key, because building my businesses has been solely on word of mouth referral for 13 years. Never paid for an ad. And so to do that is truly a skill from sport, because we have to get along with teammates that we might not agree with. We have to get along with coaches at times that push us in ways we don't like. We have to face our fears. We have to overcome things. So networking really is the skills that we learn, is how to be a good teammate. And if you know how to be a good sport and a good teammate, you'll be successful when you leave your sport, when you get into business or you get into the real world.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And I think that obviously the key word there is relationship, and just being open to utilizing that skill set to to network and connect. I mean, even as early as high school, just whether it's coaches or parents or friends, but building those relationships over the years, and not being afraid to ask for help, and having that kind of that servant manner that you talked about, just being willing to help others, because I think that's obviously a key part of networking. So let's talk about NIL, name, image, likeness. We always talk about this on the show, and a lot of the athletes, like myself and you included, NIL didn't exist back when we were competing. There were maybe different versions of it, but more about just the whole, talk about your thoughts on it, both positive and negative.
Okay. I like it. So I'll state that outright, because it gives the autonomy back to the athlete, because the NCAA specifically has owned athletics and owned the athletes for a long time. I mentioned that I had a job through college, and for a period of time, a lot of the athletes were not allowed to work. Some of them couldn't manage it because they really needed to get their academics in order, but I was a person who needed to have a job. I joked with you about what my schedule was. I kind of really missed that schedule, to be honest with you. I kind of put myself on that schedule as an entrepreneur. That's actually how I've been successful, is that schedule. But the NIL piece is awesome in that athletes who couldn't or weren't the stars could still have opportunity to build sponsorship, relationship, representative to things within their sport, or brands that they wouldn't have access to before, have access to income in a way that they didn't have access and were held beyond that. I think that part is very powerful and very positive. The negative piece that I feel is that at times you miss the pure joy of the sport itself, which I still had as a collegiate athlete. And social media is something you and I didn't experience. And I think that knowing how shy I was and knowing who I was at that time, I think I would have struggled in this land of social media constructs to build an image in the public, the way that is almost celebrity status for a lot of these athletes. I also think that some athletes, that comparison syndrome, we already have so much comparison to one another as our teammates, right? Like, and when you're a runner, you're racing. Not only are you racing against your own time, you're racing against your teammates' time, and you're racing against the other competitors, right? That you're going against in a meet. And with soccer, like, you're competing for a spot, you're competing for a starting position, you're competing, and when you add NIL to that, and we get the social comparison, and again, coming from my mental health background and knowing how our brains work, and knowing the dopamine hits that happen with social media, and knowing the dopamine and serotonin issues that we have with mental health, et cetera. That's the piece for me that I really want any athlete to focus on. What are your core values, no matter what, and only accept sponsorship, relationship, et cetera, that really suits you. If you are a really healthy eater, but you want money from Doritos or McDonald's, like, I think a lot of professional athletes have to deal with that gap, right? Like, it still makes me laugh that Stephen Curry, he's not going to eat a Subway sandwich most of the time, right? But he reps Subway. I get that. Unless you're those guys and you can pay for your personal chef, stick to your core values and stick to what really means a lot to you in your heart, because at the end of the day, you have to rest your head at night, truly. And if you get an injury and you're no longer competing, did that contract allow for that? or are you all of a sudden gone with that money, gone with that sponsorship, gone with that thing? So make sure that the legal side of your contracts are reviewed by others. Make sure you understand and get involved with people who have your best interest at heart. And that's the business side for me, the entrepreneur side for me. That's like, you got to protect yourself. You really have to protect yourself. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of us, the negative side, I guess, is just maybe lack of education. And you brought up some great
Mm-hmm.
points, just things for people to look out for, which is good. So let's talk about your transition out of sports. So I mean, you love soccer, played your whole life. Talk about your transition, and then after that, kind of giving advice to other athletes in the same situation.
So my transition was abrupt and not what I anticipated. And there's a long story that I won't go into about all of it, but I chose, along with several other players, our senior year to depart from the team because of the coach. Wasn't the original coach who recruited me. He basically had destroyed a lot of the morale, a lot of the team. After my original coach brought us in, he retired. And then unfortunately, he didn't select Leslie Gallimore. He selected someone else to be the head coach. And that head coach definitely did a lot of damage to the team, and players were just infighting. There were lots of things going on. And while I still felt very loyal to my team, I knew I could not play for him. And my last game that I ever played was my best game, best weekend I ever played and competed. And it was awesome. 120 minutes in San Diego. And I assisted on 2 goals to end us tying the match 2-2 at the end of the game. And we went into halftime down 2-0, and then we brought it all the way to 120 minutes. And so having to come back and make the decision, like I called my parents and was just like, I'll still end up being able to keep my scholarship because I finished the full season. I finished everything, but this is, I can't play for him. And this is why. And I shared with him my personal experience and, was sharing with whatever. And 11 of us left the team. Wow. 9 were seniors. 9 scholarship athletes were seniors. And so I wasn't the only one. And because of that, I had a real hard time transitioning because I felt so tight with my players and my teammates and so betrayed by the scenario and the situation. And so when I went to graduate school, I chose a school that couldn't be further away from what I grew up in because it was so heart-wrenching. Like, I can't imagine me staying in Berkeley. I went to every game and then I'd go home and I'd cry. So I supported my team and then I go home and cry. It was brutal. And then when I went to graduate school, one of my colleagues in class asked if I would become a coach for his team. And I'd never thought about coaching before. I'm 21. I'd coached a little bit at a high school in Oakland, and I wasn't very good at it. And there was a lot of drama involved. And I was an assistant and didn't really know what the heck I was doing. And there was head coaching drama. And I was like, well, I don't know how, but more than happy to help. And he's like, well, my daughter's team, they're 12 and 13 years old, and I think they should have a female influence. So he was very ahead of his time as far as what he felt would be appropriate for girls at a young age to see female athletes. And so I said, okay. So I went and got licensed. I did the licensing, and then I coached that team and started coaching with him. And one of those players is actually a gold medalist Olympian. Which is pretty cool. I guarantee you that the majority of what she knows came from him. And I only coached her for a couple of years. And by the time she was 16, she was better than I could have ever competed. She was phenomenal. And, playing and getting my heart back into soccer from a coaching perspective and giving back to the game that raised me was really important. So I got 2 other national licenses, and I was coaching through Michigan, and then coached in Colorado when I moved to Colorado as well. So I coached a total of 14 years, I think, over the past 20 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so you were able to just continue what you loved, and just in a different capacity.
In a different capacity, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
And now I just get to be a massive fan, which I'm actually really enjoying.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. So any just like a couple, like 2 key words to, for people to look at when they're transitioning out, because like as we say, it could be such a difficult process depending on what the reason, but regardless, it's still hard after you played all these years.
Even if you choose to, it will happen, right? Like, You know it's coming. Every athlete knows their competitive playing days are going to come to an end. So always have a plan B. That's one. And the plan B doesn't mean you have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. None of us do. We're in multiple chapters. But what else are you interested in? Do you want to give back and coach? Would you like to do something like that? Or what other things are of interest to you? I love cooking. I built a cleaning company, right? I built something that had nothing to do with sport. So you can do whatever you choose to do if you apply the same principles of what sport gave you, because those things you can't take away. Those are massive life skills and they're highly transferable. Never, ever, 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 ever think that the skills you had as an athlete are soft skills. None of them are soft. That's why they recruit us so much. They want that because we've been trained for years. We've been trained for years to do those things. So they're not soft. Yeah. So believe in yourself for sure that you can learn something new, and just know that at some point you're going to exit. So have a plan of, and grieve that you're going to grieve the loss of your playing days. You really are, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, or in between. When you no longer can compete at that level, you have to let go of who you thought you were in that capacity. And that takes time, and that takes time to face, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, that's great advice. And I think just, it's a lot of times too, the athletes still kind of identify themselves as the sport. And
Sure.
it's not Kim, the soccer player. It's Kim.
Oh, it's still Kim, the soccer player.
Well, yeah, no, and I'm still Rob the runner a little bit.
Exactly. I was going to say, you don't lose it.
There's a bigger things.
Yes.
So let's kind of wrap it up and talk about what you're doing today. I mean, you got it. We could talk for hours. I mean, there's a lot of different areas that Kim covered. I mean, she got into entrepreneurship, had her business, but talk about your current business today, what you're doing, and how people can find you.
Sure. So I am a business coach and external COO. So I help small business owners, whether they're startups, solopreneurs, or in business 2 to 5 years, et cetera. I help small business owners who are making 250 to 2 million in revenue help grow and scale their businesses. So I have soccer coaches who've come to me and taught them how to build their own brand with their own soccer coaching. I've had therapists come to me, because that's what my former degree was, how to build a therapy practice, how to build the business side of that as solopreneurs. And then I also help with clients who have multiple employees or need to hire employees. I like being the second or third person. I don't need to be the first. I like supporting other people's dreams. Coach is my favorite title, whether it's soccer coach, whether it's business coach. I just love helping see other people's successes. So that's what people hire me for, is to help build them into their next transition. I partner with different companies who refer people to me on the business side of things. A lot of athlete to entrepreneur people, literally, that's what, like Kim, they're retiring, they need to transition out of sport, they're having a hard time. How do they go into business ownership? How do they do that? So I teach people how to do that. Yeah.
That's great.
And you asked me how to find me, right?
Yeah, it's old school, and we'll put
that's
it.
Okay.
We'll put in the show notes, but just go ahead, like your website and,
okay.
and your social media, etc.
Yeah, KimBradyBusinessCoaching.com. Pretty simple and straightforward. I'm on LinkedIn as Kim Brady. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and now on the new thing called Threads as Coach KB15. You can pretty much find me all over. Email me, Kim@KimBradyBusinessCoaching.com. You can say, hey, I listened to you on Alumni Direct, and, talk to athletes, entrepreneurs with Rob, and, I want to ask you some questions. I always do a free initial consultation, so people don't have to be fearful. They can just inquire, like, what would this cost? What would this be? How can I support you? I love to give back. That's my favorite thing to do.
No, that's great. And it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. You can find us at alumnidirect.com and follow us across social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that. And then follow the show. I think this is something that, like I started the show, it is a major issue today with athletes transition out of sports, and we want to make a major impact. So definitely listen into some of these episodes on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel or across a different podcast network. But Kim, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely.